To the panelists and to our fellow researchers, a pleasant day to all of you. We, the Group 23, will present our study entitled Hallyu, the impact of K-drama and K-pop on students of Evsu-Sls. I, Therese Mikilnata, will be the one to present Chapter 1, which includes the background of the study, the statement of the problem, the scope and the limitation, the conceptual framework, and the significance of the study. The word Korea was pretty elusive before. However, things changed due to the popularity of the Korean culture or the rise of the Hallyu or Korean wave, which has affected several countries including the Philippines. The Korean wave in the Philippines started smoothly since Filipinos were invested in watching dramas. Moreover, the Korean pop music also gained popularity across the globe. Due to the rise of the Korean wave, Filipinos were greatly affected and influenced by it. We lost love and appreciation towards our own country and start adopting foreign culture and identity. Hence, we decided to conduct a study related to the Korean culture or the Hallyu wave in the Philippines. This study aims to discover the impact and effects of Hallyu wave on the students of Evsu-Sls. Since this study aimed to assess the impact and effects of Korean trauma and Korean pop music on the students of Evsu-Sls, this study attempts to answer the research questions first. What are the impacts and effects of Korean trauma and Korean pop music on the students of Evsu-Sls is the main problem. Second, what are the perception of Evsu-Sls students before and after the rise of the Hallyu wave in the Philippines? Third, did the Korean trauma and Korean pop music affect the behavior of the Evsu-Sls students? Fourth, what are the influences of the Korean trauma and Korean pop music on the Evsu-Sls students' lingual? And fifth, what are the effects of Korean trauma and Korean pop music on the Evsu-Sls students' consumerism? The main focus of this study is to analyze and determine the impact and effects of Korean trauma and Korean pop music on the students of Evsu-Sls. The scope of this research will not dig into the history, instead it will dive more into the impact of K-drama and K-pop. To help us analyze the impact of K-drama and K-pop on the students of the Evsu-Sls, we included factors that are affected by the Korean wave pop culture, which is only limited to the perceptions of the respondents, their behaviors, lingual, and as well as their consumerism. Moreover, this study is only limited to gather data from the Evsu-Sls students. The factors that are affected by the Korean wave pop culture are the language, consumerism, behavior, and perception. These factors are independent variables that would help us analyze and determine the impact of Korean trauma and Korean pop music on the students of Evsu-Sls. The purpose of this study is to tackle the impact of the Hallyu wave in the Philippines. Moreover, the findings in this study can be beneficial and significant to the students, Filipinos, and future researchers. For students, this study will serve as their guide on what is Korean wave in the Philippines and on how much impact it causes to our nation and us Filipinos, which can be beneficial for educational purposes. For Filipinos, this study will serve as an awareness about the impact and effects of the Korean wave in the Philippines, and the findings in the study will help spread awareness of how much can a small nation can culturize other nations with soft power or using their cultures like music and shows. Lastly, for future researchers, this study will serve as an additional information to use as their references in their future studies related to our study. This study will not only help the researchers to gain new ideas about the Korean wave pop culture in the Philippines to ease their curiosities, but will also help spread the word about the impact of the Korean wave pop culture in the Philippines.
Chapter 2. Review of related literature and study. This chapter presents the relevant literature and studies that the researcher considered to strengthen the present study's importance. It also presents the synthesis of the art to fully understand the research for better comprehension of the study. Related literature about the Korean pop culture. According to Spacey, year 2018, popular culture, otherwise known as pop culture, refers to the shared experiences enjoyed and recognized by most people in a nation. Pop culture is a tradition and aspects of material culture that the majority of the population regularly consumes in a certain society. By Sir Jack, 2020. Next is the advantages of Hallyu or Korean wave to the students about K-pop and K-drama. Korean wave has many advantages for teenagers, especially for students, as stated by Supriyadi, year 2015. First, it provides a lot of knowledge to teenagers who are interested in Korean culture. Second, the teenagers can follow the positive culture of Korea that is usually shown in Korean dramas. Third, the Korean wave pop culture has the potential to boost the adolescents' creativity. Fourth, it can make a big social community among the fans or the whole K-pop industry. Next is the disadvantages of Hallyu or Korean wave to students about K-pop and K-drama. As stated by Supriyadi, year 2015, the following are some of the disadvantages of the Korean wave to the students. First is the money used to buy their idols' merchandise and ticket to their concert. Second, K-pop is linked to serious health issues among young fans. Lastly, teenagers are prone to forgetting about their homeland's culture. Presented here is the related study. First is the effects of Korean wave on students. According to Blas and Aristain, year 2020, Filipinos have been greatly affected by the Hallyu wave, be it in entertainment, fashion, food, technology, and culture. It has affected mostly Filipino adolescents who have better access to media and technology. The effects of Korean wave on consumerism. As stated by Kijo and Kim year 2016, the image of Korea does not have a relationship with the consumer's enthusiasm, and it does not have a direct impact on the purchase intention towards the Korean product. Lastly is the relationship of the previous study to the present study. The previous studies related to the present study entitled Hallyu, the impact of K-drama and K-pop on students of Evsu-Sls, provides information that can help us investigate more on the certain topic. Similar studies have evaluated the impact of Korean wave on the acceptance and perception of not only the Hallyu wave but also of their culture as well as tourism, lifestyle, local goods, and products. In our study, similar approach and research problems will be delved into, particularly on the influence of Korean drama and Korean pop music to the students of Evsu-Sls cultural identity, the perception of the Eastern Visayas State University Secondary Laboratory School students before and after the rise of the Hallyu, and their influences and effects on the acculturation of the Hallyu and Korean drama and Korean pop music to the Evsu-Sls students.
Chapter 3: Research Methodology. The research design used in this study is a qualitative method of research in which the data selection is done through a survey and a set of questions that can be answered in a paragraph form. The study was conducted at Eastern Visayas State University Secondary Laboratory School, Tacloban City, Leyte. The researchers chose the place to conduct this study to give the researchers the needed information to complete the study, since almost all the students in Evsu-Sls are into K-pop music and dramas, and it fits to the researchers' study. The participants of this study are the Eastern Visayas State University Secondary Laboratory School, school year 2021 to 2022 students, both junior high school and senior high school. Ethical considerations. To ensure an ethical process in conducting the study, the researcher participants have not been subjected to harm in any ways. By this means, they were not forced to answer the questionnaire and were also made sure that all the personal information of the respondents was kept confidential, and privacy of their identity was applied since the respect for the dignity of the research participants should be prioritized. Instrument of the study. The researchers will be providing a questionnaire that will be classified into two parts. First, the researchers will ask the personal profile of the certain participant. Specifically, it seeks to answer the following item below. Number 1.1 name, number 1.2 gender, 1.3 age, and 1.4 grade level of the participant. Second is to determine the impact of Korean drama and Korean pop music on the respondents using an open-ended questions that were asked on a virtual interview through Google Meet. Validation of instrument. The researchers collected information from the survey questionnaire of the published study entitled The Korean Wave, which is related to our current study. The instrument is reliable because it has varied responses from various respondents and can offer the researchers a clearer insight about the topic. Data gathering procedure. The questionnaires were utilized by the researchers to collect information from the respondents. All the respondents are interviewed using the questionnaire stated in the Appendix C. The data gathered were arranged in a quasi-descriptive phenomenological method, which was used reliably to understand people's experiences and perceptions. Then, the researchers will arrange the questions and results of the observations of respondents. The data gathered will be analyzed through narrative analysis, and the researchers will narrate all the statements of the respondents.
According to the participants' responses, there were several factors that introduced them to Hallyu wave. These are television. From their responses, they were only watching their televisions, and then K-dramas and K-pop were being played and aired on different television channels in the Philippines. Social media includes platforms that have advertisements and promotions about Korean drama or K-pop. Family, because our family members can affect our preferences in life and they are a big influence on us. And friends. From their statements, it was stated that the respondents' friends were already K-pop or K-drama fans. Some changes were seen in some parts of the Philippines. According to the respondents, the changes they've seen were clothing, dressing up has changed because they try to copy Koreans and their idols wear. Television shows, because the Korean entertainment industry is one of the things that Korea is known for. Behavior. With a constant watching shows in Korea and idolizing people from Korea, some people in the Philippines are also acting like them. Food or cuisine. Since there are a lot of Filipinos who are constant viewers of K-dramas and Korean TV shows, it has also influenced the way they eat. Establishments. Since there are a lot of fans of Korean culture in the Philippines, several businesses made and built Korean establishments to cater the needs of the K-pop or K-drama fans, as they are also their primary target for business. Gaining more interest in other culture. Since there are a lot of Korean fans at the moment, these fans are highly likely to learn the culture of what they idolize. Language. One of the things that were influenced is the way the Filipinos speak. They try to sound like Korean and copy their accent. Some say there were no changes. Next, we have their perceptions on Koreans, K-drama, and K-pop before and after the Hallyu wave. Majority said that it has changed. Several participants have mentioned that they think of Koreans before negatively. By negatively, this includes how some people think of ugly and bad things about Koreans before. However, despite thinking of them negatively before, their perceptions changed as they became a fan of Korean pop culture. Other participants says it did not change their perceptions. Even before, they didn't think bad or negatively about Koreans as well as their culture, resulting in them not changing their perceptions about Korean pop culture. Now we talk about their thoughts and opinions on the adaptation of Filipinos to the Korean pop culture. The respondents said that it was a positive change. Several participants have stated that it is better to learn Korean culture as it can benefit us. Learning about other cultures can promote ample coexistence. Some say we must learn our own culture first. According to some of the participants' responses, we should learn about our culture first because there are a lot of things that we still don't know and no one will cultivate the knowledge of our own culture but us. Some said we must learn both of them equally. Let's move on to the effects of the Hallyu wave on their responsibilities. There are positive and negative effects. On the positive side, they feel inspired, entertained, and confident. Despite being focused on idolizing someone, it can still make us do something that will push us to go through our life. According to some of the statements of the participants, the Hallyu or Korean wave have affected them positively, which helped them with their responsibilities, both as a student and in life. Let's talk about the negative effects. They get distracted, they spend more money, and gets addicted. When liking someone or something, we want to focus on them more, which can result in addiction. Addiction is also in the process. We lend our time mostly to our idols, or by watching our favorite shows or listening to our favorite K-pop music. When we do these things, people often forgot their responsibilities, both as a student and in life. How about influence of K-drama and K-pop on the Evsu-Sls students' lingo, you may ask? On the interview, some respondents said that they know how to speak Korean but is still learning. With a constant watching of Korean dramas and listening to Korean pop music, people have caught up on some Korean words that they use when speaking to some of their friends, family members, or even to themselves. Others doesn't know how to speak Korean but wants to learn. Speaking the Korean language can be hard for some people. It can be difficult or easy for some. However, despite being a widely popular language to learn these days, several people are having a hard time learning the language. Does not know how to speak Korean and doesn't want to learn. Despite being a fan of Korean pop culture, some participants revealed that they don't speak Korean and they also don't like to learn. There are other participants that know how to write Hangul but does not speak Korean. And lastly, the other participants know how to speak basic Korean. With the constant viewing and watching of K-dramas and listening to K-pop music, some people were able to catch up and learn some Korean words. However, these words are only basic Korean words and phrases that their favorite idols and stars usually use. The last one on this chapter is about the consumerism of Evsu-Sls students. To grasp the influence of Korean pop culture on the consumerism of the students of Eastern Visayas State University Secondary Laboratory School, the participants were asked if they have spent money on Korean stuff like their merchandise. Other participants said does not have enough money but is willing to buy merchandise. Not all fans are financially stable to be able to purchase the official goods and merchandise of their favorite K-pop group or idol or favorite K-drama stars. Next, others are not interested in purchasing merchandise. Some was able to purchase cheap merchandise from an online store. As avid fans of Korean pop culture, people want to buy merchandise or goods related to their favorite K-pop idols or stars. However, since the Philippines is far from Korea, some people order or buy goods or merchandise in online stores. Others said that they are able to purchase it but does not prioritize it. To still support their idols, some people will purchase or do something aside from purchasing their official goods or merchandise to show their support to their idols. Next, some has purchased merchandise and willing to buy more. To show support for their favorite K-pop idols and stars, some participants revealed that they have purchased merchandise related to their favorite K-pop group or K-drama star. Lastly, other participants has already purchased merchandise. To show support to their favorite K-pop idols and bands and K-drama stars, some fans purchased their official goods or merchandise. The official goods or merchandise that were mentioned by some participants include albums, photo cards, posters, light sticks, stickers, and stuff or plush toys.
Chapter 5. This chapter presents the summary, conclusion, and recommendations that can be considered by the future researchers, students, and their parents. The inputs shown are based on the results from chapters 1 to 4 of this qualitative study that aims to determine the impact of K-dramas and K-pop to the students of Eastern Visayas State University Secondary Laboratory School Department, specifically students from grades 7 to 12. Summary of findings. Number 1. What are the impacts of Korean drama and Korean pop music on the students of Evsu-Sls? The most noticeable changes are the clothing and fashion sense, establishments, television shows, gaining of more interest, mood or attitude, language, food or cuisine, and some experienced no changes at all. Number 2, what are the perceptions of the students of Evsu-Sls before and after the rise of the Hallyu wave in the Philippines? Some students had a change of view after the rise of the Hallyu wave in our country. They had a better perspective of it as compared to before, while others' perception remained completely the same. Number 3, did the Korean drama and Korean pop music affect the behavior of Evsu-Sls students? Its positive effects are inspiration, entertainment, and it builds their confidence, while the negative effects are distraction, spending or splurging of money, and addiction. Number 4, what are the influences of Korean drama and Korean pop music on the Evsu-Sls students' lingual? Some students know how to speak Korean but are still learning. Some does not know how to speak Korean but wants to learn. Some doesn't know how to speak Korean but does not want to learn at all, while some knows how to write Hangul but does not speak Korean. A few knows how to speak basic Korean. Number 5, what are the effects of the Korean drama and Korean pop music on Evsu-Sls students' consumerism? Bullet 1 does not have enough money but is willing to buy more merchandise. Others are not interested in purchasing merchandise. A few does not prioritize purchasing merchandise but are sometimes willing to go for cheaper products. Some has bought merchandise and are willing to buy more. And lastly, a few experienced purchasing merchandise. Conclusion. To conclude, 5 main points were reached as a result of the data analysis and the interpretation about the impact of the Korean Hallyu wave gathered from the students of Evsu-Sls. Number 1 is its positive and negative impact. Positive as it inspires, gives motivation, builds confidence, and serves as their role models, while distraction, poor time management, bad sleeping habits, and overspending are its negative impacts. Number 2 is their newfound interest in the Hallyu wave due to it being mainstream, mostly influencing their overall fashion sense. But before having the said interest, some saw the Korean boy groups as cringe, while others were discouraged because of their obsessive and toxic fandom. Third is their change in attitude. Because of their constant exposure to these Korean products and services, they adapt or end up imitating the idol's attitude. Fourth is their growth of interest in learning to speak and write Hangul. While not all, most of the students know or want to learn more about the Korean language despite it being hard. Lastly, the study revealed that they show their support for their idols through purchasing merchandise. Some would settle for cheaper products, while others splurge on expensive merchandise such as albums and photo cards. Recommendations. Based on the findings and conclusions presented, the following recommendations are suggested for 3 main subjects: the students, their parents, and for the future researchers. It is proposed for the students to learn how to effectively manage their time and/or money and should know their limits in adapting K-dramas and K-pop. Parents whose child is invested in the Korean wave should keep a close eye and give guidance as it may significantly influence their child's lifestyle. And it is suggested for the future researchers to look at additional populations that should have a significantly larger sample size than this study to widen its reach and have the future studies combine more concrete influences of the Korean wave. Apart from that, it is also encouraged to conduct a comparative analysis between Korean dramas and Korean music to Filipino dramas and Filipino music.